In this video, we follow the meaningful story of Snoop Dogg at a luxury car showroom. Snoop enters dressed casually and is immediately met with judgment from a sales representative. However, the story takes a surprising turn when Snoop reveals that he is the new owner of the dealership. This story not only highlights unconscious biases but also delivers a powerful message about fairness, respect, and building a company culture based on human values. Join us as we explore this inspiring journey of transformation. Snoop Dogg walked into his own dealership incognito, only to be underestimated by his staff. What unfolded next was a shocking twist that delivered a powerful lesson in respect. It was a sweltering afternoon in Sunville when Snoop pulled into the parking lot of Luxury Motors, the flagship dealership he had recently acquired. The shimmering heat danced on the hoods of the sleek, high-end vehicles arranged out front, their polished surfaces gleaming under the relentless sun. Instead of arriving in a flashy car that screamed his name, Snoop drove a modest SUV and parked discreetly in an unmarked spot at the back. Dressed down in a simple gray hoodie, slightly worn jeans, and well-loved sneakers, his look was far from what anyone would expect of the new owner. The casual attire wasn't just a choice. It was a calculated decision. Snoop wanted an unfiltered glimpse into the dealership's operations, how the staff treated customers when they had no idea they were being watched. As he approached the entrance, Snoop noticed a small group of employees chatting near the front desk. Laughter and snippets of light-hearted conversation floated through the glass doors. Stepping inside, he was immediately greeted by the cool embrace of air conditioning. The faint aroma of leather and fresh wax filled the room, a fitting complement to the pristine vehicles displayed under the bright showroom lights. His presence didn't go unnoticed. The lively chatter died down as the employees cast quick, assessing glances his way. Their eyes lingered a little too long on his hoodie and sneakers, and Snoop felt a subtle but unmistakable shift in the air. Without a word, he began browsing, his demeanor calm and observant. Then, from across the showroom, she appeared. Elena. Elena was the picture of professionalism. Her sharp features were framed by a tailored blazer, her polished heels clicked against the floor with authority, and a clipboard tucked under her arm completed the image of efficiency. She moved with purpose, her expression polite but tightly controlled. As she approached, Snoop noted the faint tension in her smile, a detail most would have missed. "Excuse me," she began, her tone cool and clipped. "Can I help you with something?" Snoop smiled, his manner unassuming. "Just looking around," he replied casually, gesturing toward the cars. Elena's sharp gaze flicked over him from head to toe, her professional mask slipping ever so slightly to reveal a glimmer of skepticism. "Are you shopping for a car?" she asked, her voice laced with doubt. Snoop's smile didn't waver. "Something like that," he said lightly. Her lips tightened as she clasped her clipboard. "Well," she began, her tone taking on an edge of condescension, "we cater to a very specific clientele. Most of our inventory requires pre-qualification." Before Elena could finish her sentence, another employee called out from across the showroom, "Hey, Elena, the delivery guy is here." Her attention wavered momentarily, but her gaze quickly snapped back to Snoop, as if ensuring he wouldn't wander too far. Snoop raised an eyebrow, his tone light but pointed. "You're assuming I'm not qualified?" The question caught Elena off guard, though only for a moment. She recovered quickly, her posture stiffening as she replied with a tight smile. "I'm just trying to save you some time," she said evenly. "These vehicles start at 6 figures. Maybe I can direct you to." Snoop's expression remained calm, but the weight of her assumption didn't go unnoticed. While he didn't let it show, the subtle sting of her words lingered. The moment hung in the air, the tension palpable as Elena stared at him expectantly. Snoop broke the silence by glancing at one of the nearby cars, a sleek silver coupe with an aggressive, sporty design. He let his fingers brush the door handle, then turned back to Elena. "Nice car," he said simply. Her brows furrowed slightly, but she forced another smile. "It is," she replied curtly. "Perhaps when you're ready to make a serious inquiry, we can set up an appointment. For now, I'll have to ask you not to touch the vehicles." Snoop stood still for a moment, her words hanging in the air. He nodded once, slipping his hands into his pockets, and gestured casually for her to continue. "All right, let's hear it." What would you recommend for someone like me? Elena blinked, caught off guard by the directness of his question. Before she could formulate a response, Snoop added with a faint smile, "If you think you know what I need, I'm all ears." Her polite facade cracked ever so slightly, revealing a flicker of irritation beneath. "Maybe something a little more budget-friendly," she offered with thinly veiled condescension. "I can give you directions to a dealership that specializes in pre-owned vehicles." Snoop's faint smile didn't waver, though it didn't quite reach his eyes. He had seen enough. "That's quite the assumption," he said softly, his voice calm but carrying an edge that lingered in the air. For a brief moment, Elena faltered. She regained her composure quickly, straightening her shoulders as she said briskly, "I'll be back with a list of options." Without waiting for a reply, she turned and walked away, her heels clicking sharply against the polished floor. Snoop watched her retreating figure, his expression unreadable. Slowly, he turned back to the silver coupe, his reflection staring back at him in the glossy finish. "This," he thought to himself, "is going to be an interesting day." He stood in the center of the showroom, hands in his pockets, his gaze drifting over the lineup of cars. Around him, the staff had resumed their chatter, oblivious to the subtle drama that had just unfolded. Snoop wasn't one to jump to conclusions, but Elena's dismissive attitude was impossible to ignore. He'd come here to observe, and the picture was becoming clearer by the minute. Conversations resumed around the showroom, though Snoop caught the occasional glance in his direction. It was the kind of scrutiny he had grown used to over the years, the silent judgment, the veiled looks. Elena returned moments later, her clipboard held tightly in front of her like a shield. Her brisk stride and forced smile couldn't conceal the faint trace of irritation in her demeanor. "All right," she said, stopping a few feet away. "I've compiled a few options that might be more suitable for your situation." Snoop tilted his head slightly. "My situation?" "Yes," Elena replied, her tone clipped. She extended a printed sheet toward him, detailing pre-owned vehicles, each with modest price tags well below the dealership's typical offerings. "These are more accessible models, reliable, economical, and practical." Snoop took the list without a word, his eyes scanning the page. A used sedan, an older SUV, a compact hybrid. His lips twitched in faint amusement, but he quickly masked it, folding the paper neatly and slipping it into his pocket. "Appreciate the effort," he said, his tone even and measured. For a brief moment, Elena seemed disarmed by his response, but she recovered quickly, crossing her arms and letting her hands rest on her hips. "Listen," she said, lowering her voice as though sharing a secret. "I'm just trying to be realistic with you. Luxury Motors isn't for everyone. I don't want to waste your time." Snoop met her gaze, calm but unwavering. "And what exactly makes you think I'm not your target customer?" Elena hesitated, but only for a heartbeat. "I've been doing this a long time," she replied, her tone firm. "I can tell when someone's out of their depth." "Out of their depth?" Snoop repeated, his voice neutral, almost thoughtful. "Interesting." A flicker of uncertainty passed through Elena's eyes, but she pressed on. "I'm just being honest. It's better to be upfront than to let someone leave disappointed." Snoop chuckled softly, shaking his head. "Honest? Huh? I like honesty. How about this? You let me speak to the owner. Think we can make that happen?" Elena's eyebrows shot up, the first genuine sign of surprise on her face. "The owner? That's not possible today. The owner doesn't just drop by for casual visits. They're a very busy person." "I'm sure they are," Snoop replied, nodding. "But maybe you could give them a call. Let them know I'm here. I think they'd want to meet me." Elena's smile tightened, and her patience visibly thinned. "Look, sir," she said, her tone sharpening. "I'm trying to be as polite as possible, but this is getting ridiculous. I have other customers to attend to. If you're serious about buying a car, we can schedule a meeting with one of our sales consultants. Otherwise..." "Otherwise what?" Snoop interrupted, his voice still calm, but now carrying an unmistakable edge. Elena's frustration bubbled to the surface, her eyes narrowing as she struggled to maintain her composure. "Otherwise, I'm going to have to ask you to leave," Elena said, her voice firm but tense. The words hung in the air, heavy with implication. Snoop stood motionless, his calm gaze locked on hers, as if the entire showroom had paused to hold its breath. Slowly, he reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. All right, he said, scrolling through his contacts with deliberate ease. I'll make the call myself. Elena blinked, her brow furrowing. What are you doing? Just calling the owner, Snoop replied, lifting the phone to his ear. Shouldn't take long. Elena's confidence faltered, her irritation giving way to visible confusion. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. Around them, several employees stopped what they were doing, their attention drawn to the unexpected scene unfolding in the showroom. Snoop held up a finger, signaling for patience as he turned slightly away and spoke into the phone. Yeah, it's me. I'm at the dealership. Everything's fine. Just a little misunderstanding. Could you let them know I'm here? He ended the call and slid the phone back into his pocket before turning to Elena. They'll be here shortly, he said simply, his tone calm and matter-of-fact. Elena stared at him, her mouth slightly agape. Who did you just call? Snoop didn't answer right away. Instead, he let his gaze sweep across the showroom, lingering momentarily on the employees who were now openly watching. Finally, he turned back to her with a small, playful smile. Guess we'll find out. The tension in the room was palpable, pressing down on everyone present. Elena shifted uncomfortably, her polished composure beginning to crack. She busied herself with her clipboard, though her stiff, deliberate movements betrayed her unease. Snoop, on the other hand, leaned casually against a nearby luxury SUV, exuding a calm confidence that only heightened the tension. The employees whispered amongst themselves, stealing glances at the scene while pretending to work. The silence was broken by the sound of the main doors opening. A sharply dressed man in a navy suit stepped inside, his polished shoes clicking softly against the tiled floor. His expression was a mix of warmth and professionalism, but his eyes immediately found Snoop. Mr. Dogg, the man said with a broad smile, striding toward him and extending a hand. So good to see you. Snoop returned the handshake with a firm grip, a small smile tugging at the corners of his lips. Thanks for coming, Vince. Vince's arrival sent a ripple through the room, the murmurs among the staff growing louder. Elena stood frozen, her clipboard clutched tightly to her chest, her eyes darting between Snoop and Vince as realization dawned. Wait, you're the... Elena began, her voice faltering. That's right, Snoop said, cutting her off gently but firmly. I'm the owner. The room fell into stunned silence as every eye turned toward him. Appreciate it, Snoop said, his voice calm but commanding. The room collectively stiffened, the weight of his words sinking in. Elena's clipboard nearly slipped from her trembling hands as her wide eyes darted between Snoop and Vincent, the dealership's regional director. Her confusion quickly morphed into visible alarm. Wait, Mr. Dogg? She echoed, her voice uncertain. Vincent turned to her, his friendly demeanor giving way to something more professional, almost curt. Elena, I see you've already met Mr. Dogg. Elena blinked rapidly, her mouth opening and closing as if searching for the right words. I didn't realize. You didn't realize he's the new owner of this dealership, Vincent finished sharply. He turned back to Snoop with an apologetic expression. I trust this wasn't your ideal welcome. Snoop raised a hand, his calm demeanor silencing any further explanation. It's all right, Vincent. I think Elena and I just got off on the wrong foot. His voice was even, but there was an unmistakable weight to his words that made the entire room hold its breath. Elena's face turned ashen, and she took a step back, clutching her clipboard tightly against her chest like a lifeline. I'm so sorry, she stammered, her voice barely above a whisper. I didn't know. You didn't know what? Snoop asked gently, though his tone was firm. That I could own a place like this? That someone like me might actually belong here? Her eyes widened, and for a moment she seemed utterly lost. I didn't mean. Snoop held up a hand, cutting her off. It's fine, Elena. Really. He stepped closer, his voice dropping just enough to make everyone lean in. But let me ask you something. If I hadn't been the owner, would you have treated me any differently? Would you have given me the same respect you'd give someone who walked in here wearing a suit and tie? Elena opened her mouth, but no words came out. The silence in the room was deafening. Snoop nodded, as though her silence was answer enough. Turning to Vincent, his voice carried a new authority. Let's gather everyone in the conference room. I think it's time we had a little chat about how things are run around here. Conference room. The employees filed into the sleek, glass-walled conference room, their footsteps muted on the polished floors. The space, designed to impress with its modern furnishings and minimalist aesthetic, felt stifling under the weight of tension in the air. Elena sat near the back, her usual confident demeanor replaced by visible nervousness. Her clipboard lay untouched on the table before her, as she avoided meeting anyone's gaze. Snoop stood at the head of the room, his posture relaxed but commanding attention nonetheless. He glanced around, taking in the faces of the employees, some curious, others anxious. "Thank you all for coming," he began, his tone calm but purposeful. "I won't take up too much of your time, but there's something we need to address." The employees exchanged uncertain glances, the weight of his words hanging over them. "I bought this dealership because I saw potential," Snoop continued. "Not just in the cars we sell, but in the people who work here and the experience we provide to our customers. What I experienced today didn't match that vision." His gaze swept across the room, finally landing on Elena, who sank slightly in her seat. "Here's the thing. Respect isn't about how someone looks, what they wear, or how much money you think they have. Respect should be the foundation of everything we do." The room was silent, every word sinking in. "I'm not here to call anyone out," Snoop added, his tone softening. "I'm here to challenge all of us, including myself, to do better. This isn't just about selling cars. It's about creating an environment where everyone feels valued, customers and employees alike." The employees nodded, the tension in the room beginning to lift as his words resonated. "Now," Snoop said, his small smile returning, "let's get back to work and make this place the kind of dealership we can all be proud of." The room was still as Snoop stood at the head of the table, calm and composed. His presence alone commanded attention. Vincent lingered near the door, arms crossed, his expression unreadable as he observed the staff take their seats. The quiet murmur of whispers faded as Snoop cleared his throat, his steady gaze sweeping across the room. "Thank you all for joining me on such short notice," Snoop began, his tone measured yet firm. "For those of you who don't know, my name is Snoop Dogg, and I'm the new owner of Luxury Motors." A ripple of surprise passed through the group. Some employees exchanged nervous glances, others looked down, embarrassed. Elena, seated near the back, sank lower in her chair, her face a deep shade of red. "I came here today dressed casually for a reason," Snoop continued, his voice unwavering. "I wanted to see how this dealership operates when no one knows who I am. I wanted to experience what a potential customer might feel walking through these doors." He let the words settle in the room, the silence amplifying their weight. "What I experienced today was disappointing," he said, his gaze firm but not accusatory. "I was judged, not for what I could bring to the table, but for how I looked. And I'm not here to call out any single person, but we do need to talk about what this says about the culture of our dealership." Elena shifted uncomfortably in her seat, avoiding his gaze. Snoop's eyes briefly flicked to her before returning to address the group as a whole. "This isn't just about me," he continued, his tone softening but still resolute. "It's about every person who walks through those doors. Every customer who doesn't fit into someone's preconceived idea of what a luxury car buyer looks like." The room remained silent until one of the younger sales associates, Chris, tentatively raised his hand. Snoop nodded, giving him the floor. "Mr. Dogg," Chris began, his voice uncertain, "I think most of us try to treat customers fairly, but sometimes it's hard not to make assumptions." Snoop nodded thoughtfully. "I get that, Chris. We all have biases, whether we're aware of them or not. But here's the thing. It's not enough to just try to be fair. We have to actively challenge those biases. We have to create an environment where every person feels respected, regardless of their appearance, background, or anything else." He paused, letting the words resonate with the room. "This dealership has built a reputation for excellence," Snoop continued, his voice gaining momentum. "But excellence isn't just about the cars we sell. It's about the experience we provide. And from this day forward, that experience will be built on respect, inclusivity, and fairness." A ripple of agreement spread through the group. Heads nodded, and a few employees sat up straighter in their seats, visibly inspired by his words. Even Elena seemed to reflect on his message, her expression shifting from embarrassment to introspection. Now, Snoop said, his demeanor shifting to something lighter but no less purposeful. I know change doesn't happen overnight, but it starts with a conversation, like the one we're having now. And together, we'll make this dealership a place we can all be proud of. The room broke into a quiet murmur of agreement, the tension lifting as Snoop's words settled. Vincent uncrossed his arms and nodded approvingly, stepping forward to take the floor. Well said, Mr. Dogg, Vincent began. Let's work together to ensure that vision becomes our reality. Snoop gave a small nod of approval and stepped aside, his calm smile returning. It was clear to everyone in the room that this wasn't just another meeting, it was the beginning of a transformation. Snoop let his words linger, his steady gaze sweeping across the room. If you're on board with that, then let's make it happen, together. But if anyone feels this isn't the place for them, I respect that decision too. It's better to part ways than to compromise the standards we're setting. The employees exchanged glances, the gravity of Snoop's message sinking in. A few nodded, their expressions resolute, while others shifted uncomfortably, but remained silent. Change doesn't come easy, Snoop continued, his tone softening. But it starts here, with all of us making a commitment, not just to the dealership, but to each other. We have an opportunity to set a new bar, not just for luxury motors, but for the industry as a whole. He straightened, his hands leaving the edge of the table, and took a step back. Starting next week, we'll begin new inclusivity and customer experience training. This isn't just a formality, it's about ensuring that every person who walks through those doors feels valued and respected. The room was still, the hum of the air conditioning the only sound. Elena, her cheeks still flushed, but her posture a bit straighter, nodded subtly. It was clear she was processing everything, the weight of her earlier actions hanging heavily on her. Vincent, Snoop said, turning toward him, I'll need your help coordinating the training sessions and reviewing our policies to make sure they align with the values we're setting. Absolutely, Vincent said, stepping forward with a firm nod. Consider it done. Snoop gave a small nod of approval before turning back to the team. Look, I know this is a lot to take in, but I didn't buy this dealership to keep things the same. I bought it to make it better. And that starts with us. We're not just selling luxury cars, we're selling an experience, a promise. And that promise starts with how we treat people. He paused, his gaze settling on each employee, his voice steady and sincere. If we can't do that, then we have no business being here. The silence that followed wasn't uncomfortable. It was reflective. The kind of silence that comes when people are truly considering their actions and the path forward. Snoop took a step back from the table, his calm smile returning. All right, that's all for now. Let's get back to work and show every customer who walks through those doors what luxury motors is really about. The employees began to file out of the conference room, their expressions a mix of introspection and determination. Elena hesitated as she stood, her gaze meeting Snoop's once more. Thank you, she said quietly, her voice laced with humility. Snoop nodded, his expression kind but firm. You've got this, Elena. Just remember, every step forward counts. As the room emptied, Vincent approached Snoop, a small smile tugging at the corner of his lips. Well, you sure know how to make an entrance, he said. Snoop chuckled, his usual easygoing demeanor returning. Sometimes you gotta shake things up to make them right. Vincent nodded, his respect for the new owner evident. If today's any indication, this place is in good hands. Snoop looked out toward the showroom floor, the sleek cars gleaming under the bright lights. It's a start, he said. Now, let's see what we can build. Snoop Dogg entered his newly acquired dealership, Luxury Motors, in Sunville, in disguise, dressed casually to avoid recognition. He parked his unassuming SUV at the back of the lot, intentionally blending in. As he walked towards the showroom, he scanned the sleek, high-end vehicles, the sun reflecting off their polished surfaces. Inside, he noticed a group of employees chatting near the front desk. He stepped inside, greeted by the cool air conditioning and the smell of fresh leather and wax. The room fell quiet as the staff took notice of his casual attire, gray hoodie, worn jeans, and sneakers. Their subtle looks didn't escape his attention, but he remained calm and observant. Elena, a middle-aged woman with sharp features and an authoritative air, approached him. Dressed in a tailored blazer and polished heels, she carried herself with efficiency. "Can I help you?" she asked coolly. "Just looking around," Snoop replied, gesturing towards the cars. Her gaze quickly shifted to his attire, and she subtly judged him, but he didn't respond. Instead, he casually admired a sleek silver coupe. She continued, "Well, we cater to a very specific clientele here. Perhaps I can recommend something more suited to your situation." Snoop raised an eyebrow. "Are you assuming I'm not qualified?" he asked, his voice steady. Her response was quick. "I'm just trying to save you some time. Our vehicles start at 6 figures." Snoop smiled faintly, observing her attitude. "I see. Maybe you could recommend something more budget-friendly." Elena's smile tightened. "I can point you to a dealership that specializes in pre-owned vehicles," she replied. Snoop felt the sting of her assumptions but didn't let it show. "That's quite an assumption," he said, his tone calm. He thanked her for the list of cars she provided, which were all significantly below the dealership's typical price range. Snoop was about to continue the conversation when another employee called her away. He took the opportunity to call the owner of the dealership himself. His calm, assured demeanor had caught the attention of the staff, who now watched the unfolding scene in quiet anticipation. When the owner arrived, it became clear to Elena that the person she had judged so harshly was, in fact, Snoop Dogg, the new owner of Luxury Motors. Her embarrassment was palpable, and she quickly apologized for her earlier assumptions. Snoop, not interested in humiliation, used the moment to call for change. He gathered all the staff in the conference room and explained that while Luxury Motors had built a reputation for excellence, that excellence had to extend beyond the cars to the way people were treated. He emphasized the importance of challenging biases and creating an environment of respect and inclusivity. Elena, realizing the error of her ways, sincerely apologized. Snoop acknowledged her apology but reminded the team that accountability was key to change. The meeting ended with a renewed sense of purpose, and Snoop was committed to ensuring that everyone, no matter their background, would be treated with dignity and respect moving forward. A week later, Snoop saw the cultural shift he'd hoped for when he observed Elena engaging with a customer in casual attire, showing genuine interest and respect. It was a small victory, but one that gave him hope for the future of Luxury Motors. Disclaimer: all stories shared on this channel are entirely fictional and created for entertainment purposes. We advocate for a world where everyone has equal rights under the law and where society continues to grow in fairness, development, and civilization. Our goal is to share heartwarming stories that contribute to making life better. Any resemblance to real events, individuals, or organizations is purely coincidental and unintentional. These stories are not meant to reference any actual people, events, or entities, and contain no political or religious connotations.